Hello and welcome to another episode of the Talent Transformation Podcast. Today we are at the U.S. Postal Service with Jenny Utterbach, the Vice President of Organization Development. Jenny, pleasure to be here.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, I'm actually your guest in a sense here because we are in the post office headquarters.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to this. Can you start maybe by giving me an idea of what does it mean to be Vice President of Organization Development at the post office?
So for me, this is a pretty incredible role. I'm responsible for helping shift and shape our workforce of today and in the future. So I'm responsible for your traditional, some of your org development functions, org design, org effectiveness. I lead all of the leadership development, succession planning, talent management training, talent acquisition functions within the organization. So I've had an opportunity to really leverage a lot of the deep expertise and experiences that I've had throughout my career.
So how did you get into the post office?
Great question. I started in the Postal Service in 2007 as a recruiter. So,
okay.
Yeah. So
right.
At the time, the Postal Service, like many other organizations, were struggling to fill some of the hard to fill, hard to recruit professional positions. So leadership at the time created a new talent acquisition and retention group. And I was one of the first recruiters that was hired here at the Postal Service to bring in other external talent to fill those niche jobs.
Okay, so I spent 7 years as a recruiter myself, so that's interesting. And was that accidental or intentional in a sense? I mean, what did you think when you were coming to the post office to do recruiting? What was in your mind?
It was a little bit, I think, accidental and a little bit of luck. So prior to coming to the Postal Service, I worked for a civil engineering firm in more of an HR generalist capacity. So Recruitment and hiring was part of that. But one of the recruiters, the director at the time, sourced me, reached out, shared about the opportunity. I thought, well, this will be interesting. Why not? So I applied. I had the opportunity to join. At the time, I did not understand the depth and breadth of what we offer here at the Postal Service.
Yeah.
But it was a really great opportunity to come in to build our university relations recruitment group and leverage some of my, a little bit of prior recruitment experience. I thought I'd be here a couple of years, and 17 years later, I'm still here now getting to lead the org development group.
Time does fly.
It does.
Yeah. What is the scope of the U.S. Postal Service? Because I know it's pretty broad. It's much broader than I thought it was. I think you even have a jail. Is that true?
A jail. Well, we do have our Postal Inspection Service, which is the oldest law enforcement agency in the country.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, but we are the second largest employer. We service over 167 million addresses, 5-6 days a week. We've got 31,000 postal facilities across the country. We have over 640,000 employees. We deliver to every community across the country. And that's something we really pride ourselves on.
And you have basically the largest retail network in the United States.
We do.
I don't think anybody has 30,000 physical storefronts. So you're at the top in several categories there. But also in terms of employee mix.
You name the profession, we have it.
You've got a lot
doctors, nurses.
Oh, I didn't know you did that.
We do, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we have some doctors, nurses on staff that are tied in. We have a large general counsel. We've of course got your HR professionals, your marketing, finance.
Yeah,
we've got a large sales force.
A sales force.
We have we have our own sales force.
Okay.
Which we are continuing to. That's also a part of our transformation. So a part of our Delivering for America plan, one of the pillars is really focusing on revenue growth and opportunities. And our sales force is large and strong and is a critical part of our ability to really get into some of those markets.
Right. So that really places a a challenge in front of both talent acquisition and talent management.
Yeah.
From a normal operating perspective and also from a transformation perspective, right? So you have to go to market in every market and in many different ways for many different communities in each market.
Absolutely.
The post office today, okay, you are on a digital transformation journey.
We are.
And I think this started a couple of years ago, right? So tell me about that, and tell me what the scope of that is and what it is you're trying to accomplish with that transformation.
So in terms of our digital and technology transformation in the HR space, we've really taken a step back and we've looked at, our suite of different systems and technologies that we have. Like many organizations, many are old, they're legacy systems, they're antiquated. And so we have put together our roadmap. We put this together about 4 or 5 years ago. And we started first looking at what could we do to move to a best-in-class recruitment and hiring system. We're looking at what we can do really to help drive the performance. And really, for me, when we talk about this digital transformation and the technology transformation, has to start with the behavior change and cultural change that we're trying to drive.
Right. Yeah.
And so for us, that is incredibly important. So when we talk about the suite of technologies, the first thing that we do as an organization, as a leadership team, is take a step back and really look at what are our current processes and how do we need to redesign them.
Right.
And I've been challenging our leadership to really think about how can we redesign the process and then let technology enable versus going down the path of having technology behind the wheel.
Right. And for you, it's, from what I understand, much more than just being more efficient.
Yeah.
You have some really defined objectives beyond that. Let's talk about those. Let's talk about, agility, the ability to define experiences, change experiences as market conditions change. It's interesting because of all the government agencies, right? I just want to point out, it's something that you know well, but maybe some of our listeners don't think about, but the post office competes against commercial companies.
We do.
And other agencies do not. They are just an agency. They're the only organization that does what they do. But you actually live in a competitive world.
We're an independent agency of the executive branch. And with that, I do think it's important for the listeners to know we're not federally funded. So we are not supported by U.S. tax dollars. So because of that, we do need to look at, how can we as an agency and an organization, in a competitive organization, be as efficient as possible. But right now, we have really been executing on a 10-year strategic plan that's really helping us take a balanced approach to make sure that we can cover our costs while continuing to deliver for the American public. So we're looking at, what's within our control that we can, drive the efficiencies. We're reinvesting back into the organization in terms of our mail processing facilities and investing in our employees. We had some legislative change that was passed a couple of years ago. And then there's an area in terms of revenue growth, and that gets to that competitive piece that we're trying to drive. So all of that complexity makes it challenging from a human capital perspective when you look at recruitment, hiring, performance, and how do you support the different segments of the workforce on this, large scale transformation that we're having as a business. But then also we got to bring the people along with us.
Right. Yes. And that transition is actually going at a pretty good pace right now, I would say. And we see a lot of transitions. So it's obvious to me that it's moving pretty fast. How long do you think you spend doing this? I mean, what's the horizon for this? Where does it stop?
It doesn't. It's the short answer. If you do it the right way, it doesn't. We continue the momentum and the progress, but as soon as you think you're done, user demand and employee interest and employee experience, it continues to evolve and change. So as the world changes, our employee base and our customer base changes. So
Yeah.
we've got to make sure that we can evolve with the changing expectations.
How are you dealing with the idea of change internally with the employee base?
That's a great question. We're trying to tackle it head on.
Mhm.
Part of it started with outlining our Postmaster General, who is our CEO. So similar to other organizations,
Who came from outside of government,
yes.
right? Yes.
About 5 years ago, Louis
Yeah.
DeJoy came in externally, and it's been perfect timing in terms of what the organization needed. He's come in with a fresh set of eyes, and really has taken a step back and has challenged some of our past practices. He worked with the executive leadership team to really define a path forward on how we can transform our business model. So right now we're in the process of establishing some of our regional processing and distribution centers, our local processing and distribution centers. These are really large facilities that give us capacity to really drive some of the revenue growth that we're looking for. We have been standing up sorting and delivery centers, which allow us to reach a greater density of employees. So with all these changes, we've got to make sure that we're bringing the employees along with us.
Yeah.
So we're investing in training for the employees. There is an incredible amount of communication around what's happening, why it's happening, what's changing, what it means for them. So we're trying and working really hard to equip that mid-level managers, as well as those frontline supervisors, to work with their employees to be on the forefront of adopting the changes that we're going through.
Yeah, let's zero in a little bit on those managers for a minute. We often talk about them as sort of the next gen leaders inside of organizations, and they are pretty vested in the digital transformations that are going on inside of companies. So how are you thinking about the next gen manager? What is your archetype, and how far along are you in terms of creating that or facilitating that inside the organization?
So we're tackling that on a couple of different fronts. We're investing in redesigning some of our training programs and our leadership programs to equip them with some of the skill sets of that next generation. So we need them to be agile, resilient. We need them to be able to leverage technology, to be honest with you, and really embrace the digital transformation and how that translates to impacting their day-to-day work. As we look at the work of our frontline supervisors and mid-level managers, we've really been investing in how can we provide them with the tools and resources that they need so they can focus on the employee side and managing the workroom floor and setting performance expectations, giving feedback, creating an environment where employees want to come to work, instead of being behind a desk, trying to crunch numbers, crunch reports. All of that converges in the broader employee experience as we want to really retain our new employees that are coming in who are becoming that next generation of leadership for us.
Yeah, and the next generation behaves very differently. So how are you dealing with the generational changes that that we see in the market in terms of labor? And are you looking very specifically at the particular generational groups and how they behave and what you have to provide in order for them to be successful?
So, great question. When we look at the different segments of our workforce, the thing that we focus on is that we all have the same basic human needs, right?
Right.
So we all want to be successful when we come to work. We all want to be developed. We all want to feel like we've accomplished something. I think that piece transcends generations.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
To be fair, I think in terms of how we, recruit and hire and retain and train, that varies. And we've got to introduce new training modalities. But we also can't leave our other generations behind us.
No, you can't. You can't. And that would create a huge crisis just in terms of manpower anyway. So nobody wants to do that, particularly because and this is one of the challenges with a lot of our commercial customers, is that the generation that has been in that company for a while has a lot of hidden knowledge. Okay, knowledge that's not explicitly documented or made available anywhere, right? And you have to you can't let that intellectual property slip away
And walk out the door.
and walk out the door, and maybe retiring, walking out the door, but it's the same thing,
It's
right?
the same
thing. The knowledge goes no matter how it happens, and you don't want that to happen. At the same time, you need to create new kinds of you need to generate new knowledge, okay, from new experiences, and so how are you thinking about learning, for example? So we know that the newer generation prefers to learn differently. We see that now just because of their experiences as they grow up. I mean, their experience in school was different than my experience in school. We memorize things. They don't memorize anything.
Right.
It's all, information's always available. You don't need to memorize anything. Kids grew up working in groups, on projects. We didn't do projects in school. So there's a lot of differences there. I mean, how are you thinking about the transformation accommodating those types of things?
So depending on the segment, we've got, different approaches. So we still have employees who start with us as a letter carrier or a processing clerk or retail and service associate. And they have an opportunity within 2 years to convert to a career position with us, which is a great retention tool for the organization.
Right.
We also then really invest in a lot of our frontline leadership training for our supervisors, our managers. We're looking at different modalities. So we're really focusing a lot on the, in classroom and balancing that with the experiential learning on the job, which is how most adult learners best learn.
Yes.
We've had some, mixed use in terms of going from an in-classroom approach to a virtual approach. That in-person piece is still important to us in terms of creating that cohort and having shared experiences and creating a safe learning environment where people can practice some of the skills that we need them to. In terms, though, of the generational, the next generation of leaders, we are seeing people who are being promoted quickly into supervisor and manager roles. And in the past, they had that institutional experience and knowledge.
Yes.
And so we are focusing more in some of our management and leadership classes on those functional technical areas, whereas in the past, we were able to make the assumption that
it was a given,
and it was coming with them.
Yeah.
Now, on the flip side, there's value, I think, in bringing in the new thought processes. So we do that with, the next generation of employee and leaders. We also have balanced in some areas where we haven't quite developed the skill set, and we'll bring people in externally who also bring their commercial experience to the table. And it's an awesome mix in terms of our ability to really think through and work collaboratively to solve some of these large problems that we're tackling as an organization.
Yeah, because you're actually hiring cyber engineers.
We are.
Cybersecurity engineers,
Absolutely.
Right? And so you're going to pick them out of the market. You're not going to grow them from just getting out of college, although you can bring in young people out of college that are very technical. But if you want an expert, you need somebody that's been in the field for a while. So as you change the organization internally, how do you communicate that from a talent acquisition perspective? Because you can change your organization. And a lot of our customers are changing their organizations, but then their brands are very big.
Yeah.
And the post office has a very big brand too. So, we spend a lot of time talking to them about the brand because you can improve everything inside your organization. If nobody outside the organization understands that, it's really hard to bring new people in.
It is. And when people think of the Postal Service, they think of your carrier. They think of the physical footprint that we have. They don't always think about the incredible infrastructure that supports that. So we have different tacks that we take depending on who we're recruiting.
Right.
So we have a different employee value proposition for some of our professional hires. The employee value proposition that we have for some of the skilled maintenance workers that we're looking for, which is a big focus area for us right now, is that we have an incredible amount of technology that we're introducing as we're standing up these new regional processing and distribution centers.
That's a very hard segment to hire in, right?
It is a very hard segment to hire in.
So everybody is really struggling with that category.
Yeah, and we're successful in some markets, and then there's others because we're a microcosm of the nation.
Yep.
Where we've got to put a little bit more focus and effort. And what we've started to do is to tackle some of those positions like we do our professional hires, which we haven't had to do in the past. But the sell is the amount of change in technology and opportunity that we have in the Postal Service with some of these new sites. And it's not just in the new sites. We're making investments in our existing facilities. We're really trying to make sure that, next year we're going to be 250 years old. And we're really hoping.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. We're really trying to be around for another 250
That's a lot of candles
years.
on the cake.
It's a lot of candles. Yeah. It's a forest fire. But we're really trying to make sure that we're here, and we're in a sustainable spot, both financially and in terms of the processes that we've put in place.
Right. And do you look a lot at the competition?
I think from a talent acquisition competition space, we compete everywhere because we're in every market. And again, our challenge is, I think, less about some of our specific competitors, but we're competing for talent in every community in America, and we have tough jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, our carriers are walking.
Yes.
They're out in the elements. We've got a mix, of course, of walking and driving routes, but they're out in the elements. Working in our mail processing facilities is a physical job, and it's not for everybody. And so I think that's also part of our challenge, is making sure that we're being really open with our employees or potential prospective employees about what the job entails, but also balancing that with the great benefits, the opportunity to step into a lifelong career. So, we talked a few minutes ago about current generations aren't staying with organizations like they used to.
Right.
I'm hoping and I'm hopeful that people will realize that once they start with the Postal Service, you've got an opportunity to have multiple careers within the same organization, given our size, scope, and the vast opportunities that we have. So I started as a recruiter. I thought I'd be here a couple of years. 17 years later, this organization continues to keep me challenged and excited about the future. And I want to be a part of the transformation and changes that we're driving right now.
Well, that is the objective of all of our commercial customers. Nobody buys into the idea that people will just come in, work for 3 years in your company, and then go off to another company. I mean, from a company perspective, that's not good at all. No. I mean, you are really only hitting your stride in your third year. And your best and highest value that the company can get out of you is that next decade to 15 years, where you're super energetic about your career, you're really interested in doing new things, you have a high level of curiosity, but you have some knowledge that you can apply. And so, I think, everyone is trying to figure out how to make that experience an interesting and exciting experience that you just want to stay in.
And we have those same thoughts around our current employees, to be honest with you, because we really do value the internal mobility, the internal advancement, and we have an incredible amount of resources, training, materials, professional certifications that we invest back into our workforce, because we have you hear sometimes, our employees bleed postal blue. There's an incredible commitment and loyalty to the organization. And so people come in and they will stay 5, 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years. It's not uncommon for people to have started right out of high school and retire from the organization. And we're still seeing that, because we're still seeing, even where people have come in to the Postal Service over the last 4 or 5 years, when I speak to our leadership programs, I hear that managers or our senior managers and even some of our executives have been here 5, 6, 7 years.
But you have a great asset there because some of our customers are challenged because they have a very high rotation, high turnover, and it's hard to get the internal mobility programs off the ground. It's hard to get the training off the ground when you have a very short amount of time to actually get people involved with it. If a lot of people will spend the first year of their job in a state of minor confusion, right? Trying to figure, certainly when we're talking about large companies, where do I go for this? Where do I go for that? After that dust settles and they start to figure out how to operate in the company, that's when you can start talking to them about, where they could go if they learn new things.
Yes.
And some of our customers are just challenged by the fact that they don't get to have that conversation before the person is already thinking about leaving. So it sounds like you have enough time. How are you communicating this to the workforce? And when do you start talking to them about this? Do you talk about this in your pitch when you're bringing them into the post office, or do you wait until they're in the company 3 years?
No, we do talk about this in the pitch as we have prospective employees, and that's at all levels of the organization. We also have an incredible amount of communication around some of our career conferences. So similar to an external job fair that you do for prospective candidates, we have that we call career conferences for our internal employees.
Oh, okay.
And the last few years, we've had over 50, 55 conferences across the country. We offer virtual supervisor job fairs, which allow us to, share the expectations of the job. They hear directly from our operations leaders. They learn how to apply. They learn the skill sets that we're looking for. And so there's a lot of things there that we've been doing the last 2-3 years to really educate the broader workforce around advancement.
You might be ahead of some of our corporate customers on that. That sounds like
let our secret out.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a very muscular internal mobility program. I think that for a lot of our customers, what was holding them back about internal mobility was the politics of it. The managers buying into the fact that their staff could leave their role and go work somewhere else in the company was something that, the company as a whole, HR was very sure that they wanted to do it, but the line managers were not so sure. It sounds like you're beyond that. Yeah.
We have an incredible amount of buy-in from our operational leadership who also see the value because they're beneficiaries too.
They are.
So the
yes.
people who come in as our frontline employees get promoted to supervisors, get promoted to managers, and then also make for more, I think, productive admin staff and support staff because they know the business.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So we are lucky in that respect that we do have a lot of support.
Yeah, I think for managers in some companies, it comes down to, I get what it's about, but I'm being evaluated on a short-term basis. And if I'm only being evaluated on my next 3 quarters, then maybe I don't care as much about the overall. But you have to go out and sell it, right?
Yes.
You have to go out and sell it, and of course you're getting people with a fresh perspective on what you're doing, but at the same time they understand the organization, which is a tremendous thing, right? I mean, to have somebody come in and say, I've been in the company for 6 years already. I know how those other areas operate that we interface with.
Yeah.
So that sounds, as I said, it sounds like a very strong program. So you started 17 years ago talent acquisition. Where did you go after talent acquisition? Did you go into a generalist role or?
No, I transitioned into our organization effectiveness group at the time, which handled our org design, making sure we were aligning strategy to structure, our job classification work. I stayed there for a few years, taking on increases of responsibility. Had an opportunity to work in our leadership and career development group. And then, honestly, I took a step back and I went out and I did a couple of roles in operations.
Okay.
Because I had a lot of deep human resources and org development expertise.
Right.
But I really wanted to understand the impact of what we roll out nationally on our employees and our customers, which for me is our internal customer.
Right. And do you think that you were the driver of that process throughout your career, or do you think that the organization was really guiding you in that way?
I think it was a combination. I was a willing participant. I always wanted to take on larger roles because I was interested in having a greater impact and making sure that HR could have a seat at the table. And organizationally, a lot of our leadership has worked and grown up in the organization. And so having the ability to walk in their shoes and to be able to then sit at the table and understand their pain points, what they're going through, has made me more effective in my role in serving them in this capacity.
Right.
So that was incredibly beneficial. But we also have awesome succession planning programs and processes in place. And I am a beneficiary of all of our leadership programs and succession planning processes. And one of the things that I've appreciated the opportunity to do in this role is to really challenge our practices of the past. So when I came back from my operational roles, I led the HR technology and innovation team, which was my first formal foray into the technology space.
Okay.
That gave me an opportunity really to build my own competency in the technology world and where we were trying to go more directly with the digital transformation on the HR side. And that is a competency, I think, that's really important for leaders to have, particularly as we continue to grow them. And you talk about the changing, pace of the world's changing at a great pace. Companies are changing. And the way to really keep pace with the evolution is to leverage technology to enable your business processes.
Right, exactly.
And that is something that we focus on. And I've seen, either inside or outside of the organization, when you've got a little bit of that background, at least enough to be dangerous, it helps really push the HR human capital mission and the broader mission of your organization.
It might even be an essential ingredient, really.
I would agree.
And I think that is also, I think we were talking about that earlier, about the next gen manager, and they need a certain technical aptitude. And at any level in your career, it's interesting that you did it at that particular stage in your career. But I think that the way I view it, being, coming from technology itself, is that it's really available to anyone. Okay. There's a lot of mystique around technology, but, every technologist, just like every scientist, knows that there's always somebody else that knows more than you in some area. And if you're coming from an operational perspective, you kind of know what it has to do, which is as important as knowing how it does it. So I think sometimes managers are more fearful, unnecessarily fearful, of getting engaged with the technology. Are there new programs that you have just in the idea phase that you are just thinking about? I mean, I just want to dig in a little to your brain. What do you, if you had to do something next that you're not doing now?
So we've been teeing up. We took an inventory of all of our leadership and management programs over the last year or so. And we are redesigning them into more of a component-based training. So that way we can make sure that when you go through Management 201, all leaders are going through the same program. So they're learning the same soft skills. We're overlaying that with our functional technical training at all levels. So we've taken a step back and we've got now our 2, 3, 4 year roadmap. We also are looking at, and this ties to our maintenance function, which is important. Is we today have a lot of training that is based on specific machines, and we are in the process of looking at how to move to more of a component-based, skills-based approach.
To abstract it a little bit from the machine itself.
And really, kind of have that vocational school expertise. Regardless of technology that they're using in their specific facilities, and then just have machine familiarization as needed. So I'm incredibly excited about where we're headed in some of that space. We've been building some expertise and capabilities within my team to be able to support, I think, the business in ways that we haven't been able to support, maybe as readily or as, be as agile and responsive as we've wanted to, and really trying to bring in different types of modality.
Yeah.
In the past, I think we've done a little bit too much death by PowerPoint and really figuring out how can we meet the learners where they are. Everyone's got different learning styles.
Right.
So that's really our focus. So stay tuned, because in the next 2-3 years, I think you'll see some really big things from the Postal Service in this space.
Your role, you seem very engaged, very excited about what you're doing. Did you think it would be this exciting a couple of years ago?
I don't know if I realized how exciting it would be. I've always, when people would say, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
A number of years ago, I said, the job doesn't exist yet.
Right.
And 4 years ago, they created this role.
And you said, oh my gosh.
I said, oh my goodness, I absolutely want to lead that team. And I am incredibly proud of the level of expertise and discipline that my group has brought to our HR transformation that enables some of the broader DFA strategies. But yeah, I'm loving this opportunity. When I look back, it feels like I just started a couple of years ago, and I've got, many years ahead. I want to see this through. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I want to see these changes through. I think we've got an incredible impact, positive impact that we can take, but we've got to have clear, consistent leadership and commitment to, regardless of who sits in our seats, we'll leave the place in a better spot. Yeah. And what we put in place is sustainable. It's not the flavor of the moment, which is why I think the process reengineering is so critical. Yeah. Because it takes the politics or the personal preferences out of it. And it's a data-driven approach. It helps us get at how can we be more efficient and effective? How can we leverage some of the commercial best practices? And ultimately, the goal is so HR can pivot and meet the needs of the business. Yes. That's why we're here.
Yes. And so, and isn't that a great place to be professionally when you're in something like that? And if you can bring that to everybody else in the organization, that's amazing. Yeah. So, Jenny, it's been great chatting with you. I'm so glad you could spend some time with us. I'd love to have you back to talk as you move further through that transformation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate the time.